Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to lay out the UVs on a model. I pulled up one of my old models that I never finished. It's lacking feet. And I've got some just proxy geometry here for the feathers. So I'm not going to worry about feathers for now. I'm just going to worry about the skin portion of this bird. So the first thing you're going to want to do, and I'm going to make sure, is you're going to be using the UV texture editor a lot. So if you go to Window, UV texture editor, and you can pop this open, and here's the UVs for this swan. They're atrocious. So I'm trying to keep this open the best I can. Actually, let me switch to a side-by-side view. And we'll see if I can't. Okay. So I'm going to turn off some extra information. Okay, so to lay out UVs, you need, the best way to think about it is, and oftentimes it's called pelting. So like if you were an avid hunter or something, and you shot an animal and you wanted to put that bearskin rug on your floor, how would you cut the skin off of it so that you could lay it flat on your floor? So you have to figure out, where do those seams belong? The analogy I like to think about it the most is sewing, but not everybody has an easy time visualizing it. But if you had a sewing pattern, you were trying to sew some pants, let's say, then you would have multiple pieces of cloth that you would have to cut out by a pattern. And then you would sew those seams together to make a pair of pants, right? So this is kind of the opposite. We're going to work in reverse. Here I've got a swan, and I'm going to cut this swan up so that I can lay it out flat. I can kind of make a sewing pattern out of it. Okay, so thinking along those lines, I'll be working mostly in edge mode. And I'm going to select these edges and make sure I get all the way around. Okay. And then in my UV texture editor, if I shift and right click, I can do this cut UVs. Okay. Now, it would be nice to know where I've cut or where I haven't. And right now, Maya does not show you this by default. So what we need to do is go to Display, Polygons, and go to this Texture Border Edges. Okay. And so you can see that some of these lines are thicker than others. So let's dramatize that a little bit for example's sake. And we'll go to this Display Polygons Edge Width attribute, and we'll set this to 4. Okay, so some of these are a lot thicker than others, including the edge that I just selected. So really what I need to do, first of all, is just drag select all of these, and I'm going to shift right click and sew them all together. Okay, so now you don't see any of those thick lines hardly anywhere. In fact, the only place we're going to see them is where there's a hole in the mesh. So I'm going to select these edges again, and I'll come over here and shift right click and cut. And I can see that just that area is cut now. Now you always want to work on both sides if you don't have the luxury of mirroring your mesh. So there it is, cut on the other wing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut the neck off. Right there looks good. And it's almost always a good idea to cut the thing and cut whatever it is you're working on in half. So I'm looking to make sure I got everything selected. I'll go ahead and do this. Okay, shift right click, cut UVs. Okay, now I'm going to cut these wings down the profile. So all the way down to the tip. Got an extra edge over here I don't want. I'm going to control click it to deselect it. And I'll shift right click, cut edge. And so I'm just continuing to cut this thing up. I'm going to switch to object mode real quick, and I'm going to use this isolate select with just the mesh I'm working on selected. That will hide all the other meshes just temporarily. Okay, I'm going to go back into object mode. I'm going to continue to cut this wing up. So I need to get this tip section cut. Now, if you ever have to decide, like on this tip right here, whether you need to go to you have to go to the top or the bottom of your mesh, you always want to choose the more discrete part of it. So the part that's not going to be seen as much. So I think it's going to be the bottom. Okay. So with that selection made, shift right click and cut. Now the shift right click and cut only works in the UV texture editor, for those of you who may miss that. You can also do it from the any view by holding down your space bar and going to edit UVs and cut UV edges. It's the same command. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to cut up this other wing. Okay, and so far everything over here in this UV texture editor is still a humongous mess. I'm still not too concerned about that at the moment. I'm going to cut the head off real quick. Okay, now here's where we get to start making it not look like a sewing pattern. So I've got it cut up, and I'm going to select a face on one of these areas. A face that's in the middle, it's not on the cut area. Okay, it's in the middle of like one of the panels. And so with that done, with that face selected, I'm going to control right click, and I'm going to tell it to go to UV shell. And that's going to select all the faces that belong on that panel. This is very important. If for some reason it bleeds over and it selects more than you thought it should when you do that, then it means that you don't have all the edges cut. You may have a problem with your mesh.